I've made no secret about my love for this lens. The first time I shot with it, I was blown away by the results. It offers a beautiful blend of sharpness paired with uniquely gorgeous bokeh and worthy of the G Master badge. This is the Sony 100mm f2.8 STF lens, one of the best portrait lenses, period. Besides the long name, this lens is somewhat of an enigma. You see, I was just like those of you who have tried this lens out. I received this lens a few weeks before it was actually announced, and I was immediately confused. On the barrel, it says it's a 100mm f2.8 lens. However, if you look at the aperture ring, you'll see that it says t5.6 and not f2.8. To make things more confusing, since Sony cameras or any editing programs for that matter don't show TStops, the EXIF data actually shows as f5.6 when you shoot wide open. Are you confused yet? As you can imagine, this has created some confusion for Sony shooters, potentially making them overlook this lens. That, however, would be a huge mistake. This lens is truly special and unlike many lenses that you'll shoot with on any system. So what makes this lens so unique and special? To answer that, we'll have to look at how most other lenses work. With a conventional lens, the amount of light that it gathers around the periphery or the outside edges of the lens, it's the same as the amount of light that comes through the center. So let's say you're taking a photo of a light source at f2.8. The edges of these light spots will appear fairly sharp. This is the case with most Sony portrait lenses like the 70-200 G Master, the 90 Macro that I showed you in a prior video, or any other lenses that you can think of on any camera system. Let's talk about the 100GM now. It has something in it that you've probably never heard of in a lens. You see, unlike all of the other lenses out there, it has what's called an apodization optical element. This lens element is kind of like a radial graduated neutral density filter, where light that passes through the filter, it's brightest in the center and it gradually gets darker around the edges or the periphery of the lens. This causes those light sources to have a diffused edge versus the sharp edges that you would see in a conventional lens. In layman's terms, it gives you smoother bokeh. It defocuses the defocused parts of the image even further, if that makes sense. So what about all this T-stop stuff that we were talking about earlier, where the lens says it's an f2.8, but the EXIF data displays f5.6? Well, this lens has an f2.8 aperture, but because of the apodization filter being gradually darker around the edges of the lens, you're not actually collecting as much light as a conventional lens at f2.8. This is where TStops, which is short for transmission stops, comes into the picture. TStops measure how much light is actually hitting your camera sensor. Generally speaking, you can use TStops and f-stops interchangeably when you're determining your exposure, since your camera's metering system should compensate for those differences. Now that you understand how the lens works and what makes it unique, I can finally talk about why I love this lens and why I choose to use it in almost every portrait session. For starters, the main attraction for this lens is for using it to get buttery smooth bokeh in your portraits. Most wide aperture lenses that I've used do a good job of making the scene look blurry, but this lens does something truly special when taking portraits. It gives you gorgeous bokeh while giving you a sharp, detailed, in-focus subject. I think this is why they call it a smooth transition focus lens, because you could truly see this transition from a sharp subject to a bokeh-licious background that is truly unlike what you would see in a conventional wide aperture lens. Another reason that I think that the 100GM is one of the best portrait lenses for Sony is that the lens focuses fast, it's quiet, and it's deadly accurate. Sometimes when you have lenses with a large front element like you see with the 100GM, you'll have to make some sort of compromises. That's definitely not the case with this lens. Whether you're shooting stills or you're shooting video, you'll find that getting razor sharp images at any aperture is actually quite easy. Lastly, the 100mm can serve as a macro lens. It offers a 0.25 times magnification in macro mode that comes in handy when I'm shooting beauty work where I want to take close-up shots and see the details in the model's face and in their makeup and just really highlighting facial features. You get all of this in a relatively light form factor with optical stabilization, as well as dust and moisture resistance. It's got an aperture ring that can be declicked and a focus hold button that can be customized in your camera's menu to give you easy access to any features that you would normally dig into a menu for. Okay, so before I forget, you're probably wondering about how this lens would perform in low light situations. Since you're operating at a T5.6 or an f5.6, you might be thinking that the lens won't work for you in those low light scenarios. Keep in mind, however, that with newer cameras like the A7 III, the A7R III, you get exceptionally clean images at those higher ISO values. In most situations, you can simply add 2 stops to whatever ISO you would have used with a different or a conventional lens, and you should get all of the benefits that this lens offers you when you shoot it wide open in low light. So if you check out my Instagram, I'd say that the majority of portraits shown on there were likely taken with this lens. And hopefully after watching today's video, you'll understand why I chose to do that. This is the second video in a series where I highlight all of my favorite portrait lenses for Sony. If you're enjoying content like this, do me a favor, consider subscribing to the channel, click the thumbs up button, and maybe, I don't know, share it with some of your photography buddies. I would also love to hear in the comment section what your favorite portrait lenses are for Sony. Again, there's going to be more videos coming out in the future in this series, and we're just delving into them one by one because, you know, if not, it would be like an hour-long video talking about all of my favorite lenses, and who wants to watch that? I don't know. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, everybody.